we've really tried to avoid using terms like rebranding or brand refresh. And it's identifying what our personality is. I mean, who are we? How do we make sure that we're injecting that authenticity into our communication?
The way that people research and buy has changed dramatically over the last 2 decades. From the channels they use, to the types of content they prefer to interact with, to their tendency to trust peers and people over businesses and brands. Now, this is forcing many companies to not only change the way they generate demand, but to rethink their approach to what brand really means. At a time when buyers are more influenced by online interactions than ads and promotions, businesses need to think hard not only about their brand strategy, but about the personality of their business and how they will empower their own employees to bring that personality to life. Welcome to Creating Connections, the show that explores the human element in an increasingly digital business world. I'm your host, Tyler Lessard, and today we're speaking with Marilyn Cox, the VP of Marketing at Clubessential Holdings and author of the soon-to-be famous article, How Elf on the Shelf Made Me a Better Content Marketer. Marilyn is an incredibly accomplished marketing exec who truly understands the importance of connecting with buyers on a personal level, and I couldn't be happier to have her on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, thank you for having me, because I always have so much fun doing work with you guys. And anything that involves video is a lot of fun to play with. So I've been with the Clubessential Holding Company for the last 9-ish months. Came on board as they were going through their beginnings of their acquisition strategy. So our holding company consists of 3 separate businesses. We have our Clubessential LLC, and that's technology that's sold into the private club space. So when you think about social clubs, country clubs, university clubs, we have our Club Ready business, and they sell technology into the fitness studio space. So those would be your Club Pilates and Pure Bar and Cycle Bar and Soul Cycle. And then we also have Presto Sports, and Presto Sports sells technology into the college, university, and university conference athletic space. So, at the highest level, we are an organization that focuses on driving the member and fan experience, which is a lot of fun because it's a really rapidly evolving space right now.
It's really interesting because you've got a number of businesses that, in my mind, I think of as a mix of, you kind of got this consumer brand, but you've got this B2B channel to market. And, I assume you appeal to wide ranges of potential audiences, and you're probably building brand and demand programs to try to encompass a lot of those different things, which must be a pretty big challenge.
It is. It is. I mean, you're certainly talking to different types of individuals, but there is this commonality across all 3. And it's what I've really enjoyed doing as we've gone through some of the discovery around what this organization in the end is. And it's about connection, because as we look at the evolution of the information age, we're kind of now moving into that experience age. And people are feeling that disconnection. Your communities now are so much more dispersed than they once were. And so some of these industries that traditionally didn't have to fight so hard for the share of the wallet, or took for granted the fact that people were just inclined to be a part of those organizations, are now having to reinvent and rethink how they interact and engage with their members. And it is something that extends online and offline. And that is a new challenge that they're having to solve for.
The challenge of connecting, engaging, and interacting with audiences seems to be pervasive across virtually every market. Even member-based clubs, who you would think have a very captive and loyal customer base, are feeling the pressure to transform how they create connections with existing members and would-be clients. In this age of authenticity, this means taking a hard look at your brand, and perhaps even more importantly, your business's personality.
It's a unique challenge in that we're not a startup. I mean, these are businesses that have existed within their industries for 10, 15 plus years. So it's not like we're having to introduce who this company is to our buyer. What we are having to do is introduce who we are now. And that has changed so much just through some different acquisitions and how they've evolved the product that we're selling. And that has changed a lot, even in just the last 12 months. So when we've sat down and thought about how do we reintroduce ourselves, we've really tried to avoid using terms like rebranding or brand refresh. And it's identifying what our personality is. I mean, who are we? How do we make sure that we're injecting that authenticity into our communication, into the expectations that we're setting for our customers, because there's a lot of resetting expectation there. And so, I mean, I think that's a lot of the practice that we're going through. I know personally for me, I've become obsessed with listening to the podcast Business Wars, where they delve into the history of famous brand rivalries. And just like any type of history lesson, there's so much to be learned from how established brands have had to reinvent themselves, especially over 100, 150 years. And some of them have done it well. Some of them have failed epically. But in the end, it's those brands that have figured out how to connect with and use their personality to connect with their audience that ultimately do it the best.
I really love that idea of brand personality and even just organizational personality as opposed to the traditional stigma of what brand really means. Because I think it aligns much better to the idea of how audiences and brands actually engage with each other today, right? In this very social age, in this age of where things are getting less formal and I think more conversational. It is a lot more about how you interact with those customers in lots of different ways, how you present yourself, and it's almost a matter of like humanizing your traditional brand, which I think is such a big part of bringing that personality to life. And I know we went through a similar process not that long ago, and I wish I had had that personality sort of idea in my head, but we went through a similar process. And one of the most important steps in that for us was going through the archetypes and thinking about, so it's not just the tone of voice or the logo or the font. It was, what do we really want people to think of us as in the market from a personality standpoint? And where does sort of humor and lightheartedness play versus being a trustworthy stalwart versus this and that? And you never want to necessarily pigeonhole yourself as one thing, but thinking through that actually brought a lot of what we are today to light, and it guides everything from the kind of content we create, the mediums that we use, the tone that we use, the visuals that we create. And I think it's a really powerful process to go through.
Yep, absolutely.
So in your 9 months of doing this, what are some of the things that you've learned in taking that sort of approach to thinking through this new brand personality or company personality? Are there things that have surprised you as you've started to go down that path in trying to change the company? And what resistance have you felt from the rest of the organization in trying to go down that path?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the most important things that I've learned, and I, it's unfortunate because it's something that as marketers we preach all the time, which is your employees are your brand and they're your best advocates. Um, it's not until I think you go through the exercises like this that you realize how absolutely true that is. When I would go to trade shows or events with different people that have been in this organization, that have been in these industries for many years, uh, people know who they are. Like we would walk through a trade show floor and they know my colleagues. They have these established reputations. And so I think one of the most important things was recognizing very early on that it's it's leveraging the personalities that already exist within the business versus trying to force this new idea or persona maybe upon the company and say, this is what you should be. I mean, just organically, this is who the company is, and this is who the industry has embraced for a long time. And so we just need to figure out how to take that and elevate it and bring it to life a bit more.
Embracing the personality, the passion, and the personal brand of your own employees, and building on that to reinvent your organizational personality is a smart way to ensure that your your personality is as authentic and genuine as possible. After all, it's your employees who will represent that personality, whether it be on stage, on the phone, on social, or even on a podcast. Which begs the question of how much your own employees should be a part of your external-facing brand and personality. Now, some companies are embracing this idea and building an army of employee advocates who are featured in their content, on their website, and who even use their own personal social accounts to share business information. Others are much more resistant to having their employees being a public face to the company. So I asked Marilyn whether or not they're going down this path at Clubessential.
Yeah. No, we are on the road. We're certainly traveling down that path. So having them get more comfortable with being a part of webinars, being a part of the face of our advertising. I mean, all of that very much is stuff that we're building into it. And that's why, I mean, to your question about, has there been reluctance or resistance that we have felt internally? I would say not towards the strategy, but I think just inherently a lot of people tend to be more reserved about being the face of an organization. That's what makes CEOs so special. Is a lot of times like they thrive on that. They want that. And in this instance, we're talking to people that they just have that reputation. They have that industry experience. And so it's getting them more comfortable and more familiar with why this is important, and that we're, as a marketing organization, our role is to help make them look good. Jimmy Fallon is just excellent at this, right? So when he has celebrities on and he does those games that always go really viral, the reason that it works is because he finds something that connects with each celebrity. He's not going to have someone do something that makes them uncomfortable or doesn't fit with who they feel that they are. And that's why it's always so great. So I think that's what we try to figure out too, and we're still trying to figure out what are those types of projects? What are those channels? Where do our people feel the most comfortable in being that evangelist?
It's not always easy to have real people from your own company be the face of your blog, to do live webinars, or to star in video content that's going out to your audience. But I do think it's extremely important if you want to create a more authentic brand and to develop a stronger, more approachable personality in the market. Now, one way I've found to make this much easier is to start with how you approach your internal culture. If your company operates and communicates in a very formal manner, it makes it more intimidating for an employee to raise their hand to put themselves out there, because they'll feel like they need to be formal, polished, and scripted. But if your culture is more relaxed, more approachable, more human, it will put your employees at ease and make them feel more comfortable bringing that type of personality to the video shoot. And it starts from the top down. Is your executive team communicating with the organization using charts and graphs, industry acronyms, and formal language? Or are they hitting record on that webcam in a natural environment and sharing updates as if they were chatting with a friend over a coffee? Now, in addition to setting the right tone for your employees, there are things you can do to help them be more comfortable and more engaging in one-to-one communication, in how they write their content, or in how they perform on camera. And one of those things is learning the art of improv comedy, which has so many transferable lessons to how we communicate effectively in business. Now, lucky for us, Marilyn spent 3 years working at Second City alongside some of the world's best improv comedians and improv trainers.
It was an amazing 3 years. It was an exhausting 3 years because they were much like what we're doing here. They were going through a lot of change. People are probably familiar with a lot of the alums that come out of Second City, some very huge comedic names and talent. But they have training centers and theaters in Chicago, Toronto, and LA. And then they also have a very extensive business to business side of what they do. And so when I joined the organization, it was at a time where they were looking to better mind their consumer audience and identify new B2B opportunities, because that's where they saw the greatest potential for revenue growth. Um, and it was a great opportunity for me because I had never done anything that was directly tied to consumer marketing. So, I mean, that was I had a lot to learn, and I did learn a lot about the differences, but also the similarities between the two. Um, I also had the opportunity to work with absolutely unbelievably talented people. I mean, it just, I was spoiled with copywriters and designers and comedic talent. I mean, it just amazing, the types of folks that I worked with every day. So it was great. But I do think probably the greatest thing that I took away from it was the actual improv experience. And I would take improv classes, and when we would do work with companies, I would absolutely, when possible, tag along and see the work that we were doing with them. And there's so much value that came out of it, because I think that when people hear improv, either they think stand up, and that's incorrect. It's a different type of comedy. Um, or they think of like sketch comedy, and sketch comedy is a great, output of improv. But improv really, the story that we would tell is it started with a woman who taught, she was a social worker, and she taught economically impoverished children, immigrant children. And she came up with all of these different games to help them assimilate. And then her son went to the University of Chicago, taught these games to his friends. They became the Compass Players, who became the founding members of the Second City. So inherently, improv really is all about listening, communication. And so those types of exercises are key and instrumental in our everyday. And I would always recommend anyone, whether you're looking at becoming a better leader or more comfortable speaking in public, or you want to become a better writer, I will always recommend Second City classes. I think they're great. So they are things that I use every single day in what I do. And probably one of the greatest improv lessons that you're taught first is the practice of yes and. So, I mean, I think a lot of us can probably raise their hand and say, yeah, we're pretty guilty about wanting to jump to no. This is why this isn't going to work. This is probably a bad idea, or we've tried something like this before. And it's a lot more fun when you can say yes. And so the idea of yes and is to not always it's not just about agreeing with someone. It is about acknowledging and then heightening and building on the idea of someone else. So I know personally, it's a practice every single day that I use. I know that when I have emails that come in particular, where if my response isn't something that is yes and, I know that I need to sit on it and think about it, because I want to be able to respond to every ask and request with that type of
I
mindset.
love it. I've done improv training a couple of times, and I absolutely loved it. And I totally agree that anybody who has the opportunity, no matter what your role is, it's a worthwhile experience. And there's lessons that we can all apply in our day to day life. And the one thing that I really took away from the yes and exercise, in addition to the focus on, yes, acknowledging, building, but to your earlier point, it's the importance of listening up front, because you can't continue that conversation if you're already expecting or anticipating what they're going to say and have already formulated your thoughts ahead of time. Which is, I think, such another big piece of improv, is how important it is to listen all the way to the end of what somebody says, uh, before injecting your thoughts and having to build on that. And I know one area where you see a lot of improv training being used is in sales teams. And a lot of sales teams go through this, which I think is a great thing. And I've watched our own sales team do this, and universally people responded that they got huge value out of it. And because I think it does, in the spirit of this show, it does, I think, really change the way you think about how you communicate, how you connect, and how you collaborate with prospective customers, with your buyers, in a way that is, it's this sort of constructive idea, but also just how in meetings, on calls, you can train yourself to be a better listener and to be, like you said, building on conversations, and ultimately using some of these techniques in creative ways. I assume you've seen that as well with sales teams.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think one of the best exercises that they would walk them through is how to have a dialogue versus a monologue, and it does a lot of times fly in the face of a lot of sales training, which is scripting, right? Like, this is the script you need to follow, or here's how you're going to whiteboard out your presentation. I mean, and all very relevant practices. I wouldn't put any of those types of training down, but I do think that one thing that people aren't taught is how to have a conversation, and how to your point, 100% listen to the end, how to build your response on what was just said prior. And even little things. And again, this kind of goes back to the idea of, because we live in this hyper technology dispersed world, little things like eye contact. I mean, it's really a shame that eye contact has become a skill that people need to be taught, but it is. If anybody's interviewed a job candidate in the last few years, you can probably agree with that. So yeah, I mean, I think it's something that sales organizations absolutely are thriving on, and it's giving them the exercise and practice in a, what I would also say, is a less intense environment, because I have been a part of sales training where they want to do role playing. Again, there's value to it, but there's nothing about it that ever feels real. Like, it'd be great if that's exactly how the sales call went, but it never goes that way. So it's good to just get really comfortable with having a conversation with someone.
It's sad but true that we need to be conscious of teaching people how to have effective social dialogue, how to make eye contact, and how to use their own body language to their advantage, especially those people who are in outward-facing roles. Which reminded me of a recurring theme in many of the conversations I have with marketing leaders today: the shift from a brand to buyer mentality to a human to human mentality. But Marilyn is pushing me to take that idea even one step further, and to think about this as human with human dialogue. Whether you're marketing or selling, this is a really important idea. How do you create conversations with your audience? But that's hard to do in a digital world where we aren't typically interacting with people in real life. So what does it mean for us as marketers and business leaders? How do we create human with human experiences that help us create better connections in this digital world?
Video is becoming so incredibly important, because it's still allowing for those live personal interactions. I know, as a buyer, when I have a video call with someone, I am 10 times more engaged with that salesperson. I know that I am that much more invested in the sales cycle, because I've started to develop that relationship. I mean, it really is. It's allowing that ability to develop the relationship with the salesperson, and so I think it's so pivotal now. I mean, how you scale that, I think, is something that so many people are trying to figure out. For a sales call, a sales presentation, sales discovery, there's a lot of opportunity in live video. Marketing, we've done videos for a long time, and I think that we've shifted to, like, let's do live video webinars, and I think we're trying to figure out ways to scale it, but how you make something that is unique and special to an individual, and that's what it takes anymore to get through to them, is, I think, something we're all trying to overcome, which is what I really liked about the exercise that we did just a couple of months ago with video. um, I mean, it really pushed us to sit down and think about, okay, yeah, these are all really great ideas. Now, how can they recreate this really great idea several times throughout the day over a period of many weeks? And that was a good challenge to play with.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit more because I also found that to be a really interesting experience and even more interesting than I thought going into it, which was a big win. So we, you and I and a few others embarked on this. What started as a webinar, but really turned into something different, where we selected a sales rep at random and asked them to learn more about how they sell today. How do they, what kinds of emails do they send? What's their typical messaging? Who are their typical customers that they're selling to? And these are sales reps who are largely doing outbound prospecting with email and phone calls and social messages. And we took it upon ourselves, as savvy marketers as we are, to think like them as a sales rep, but put on our marketing hats as well and go, okay, if you were to incorporate video into how you sell, whether it be, off the shelf videos you could share with people, or one-to-one videos or live video, how might you do that? And we spent some great time, brainstorming, what would be the best way for them to bring their story to life through video. And it really was, I think it was actually a fun and also challenging experience. One of the things that I really appreciated as you were talking through was your approach to building the story narrative, right? So getting to this heart as a sales rep of what is their story, and how do we bring that to life through a medium like video, because you have the chance to do it there where you don't in other places. So I just again love to hear you sort of your general feedback on the program, sort of how we approached it, and how did you think through that, trying to build that narrative for people using either your storytelling experience and or your improv experience.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I loved most about it is that it allowed for us to bring and interject the personality of that rep into the message. And again, I mean, this again goes back to the conversation about branding, which is, we all know our employees are our best representation of our brand. They're our brand advocates. And with the rep that we worked with, I think the first thing that I did was I went out onto her LinkedIn profile, and was looking at not just what her sales experience was, but that section in LinkedIn where it talks about like things that they do other than show up to the office every day. And her volunteer experience, and specifically when she would talk about the work that she was doing and the volunteer work that she did, she started to tear up a little bit because it meant so much to her. And I think when you find people that have that type of passion, it's, first of all, it's so much easier to write for someone that's passionate about something. So that made it a lot of fun. And then we were able to build the message around her, and it sounded like her. And, I think, to that, back to the conversation about finding the level of comfort for someone, when you can build it around what they're comfortable with and what they feel comfortable speaking about, it's a lot easier for that to take hold. So, I mean, I loved it. It was a really rewarding thing. And anytime that we can play around with how to tell a story is always fun, because I love to hear a good story, and it's great when you can be part of crafting one.
The exercise that Marilyn and I just described was part of a recent sales hacker webinar called Videoify My Sales Pitch. If you want to see what video ideas we came up with for the sales rep, including the Nappuccino video and Control F that, just connect with me on LinkedIn and I'll share the link. Now let's move on to what I really came to talk to Marilyn about. The elf on the shelf. That magical little pain in the ass that gives parents one more thing to worry about during the holidays. Now, Marilyn wrote a great article last year on the lessons all marketers can learn from the elf on the shelf. And it was surprisingly relevant to this idea of creating connections with our buyers and customers.
Yeah, I mean, I think it came out of, another like 2 a.m. waking up in the middle of the night because crap, we haven't moved the elf moment that I think any parent that has had an elf on the shelf in their house can absolutely relate to. Um, yeah, I mean, it's fabulous fun for kids. It is a just one more additional responsibility holidays for parents. But one of the things that I found is it did remind me of what we deal with in content creation every day, which is you're kind of trying to figure out how to say the same thing over and over again, just in a different creative way, and doing something that is surprising and takes on a different personality and is used in a different channel. So, I mean, that to me, there was so much relevance as I was going through that, where I thought, yeah, I mean, this is kind of what I do for a living. Is how do I take that same thing and just put it over here and make it a little more entertaining and create something though that in a lot of ways is still gamified. That's what keeps the kids interested. If this was just a latent stuffed animal, it would just sit by the wayside. They like interacting with it and figuring out what's going to happen next.
Yeah, I'm, as a parent myself, I've been through it numerous times, and I totally agree. It's actually an interesting challenge to think through every day. How can I take this? How can I change it up a little bit? But the other part of it is the fun part as a parent is pretty much every day it creates a new conversation, with your audience, which in this case is the children, about how did the elf get there? And a couple of my younger kids, they do parkour like gymnastics, and they're always scheming on, oh, the elf must be really good at parkour, and this is how he did this and that, and it creates these conversations around something so simple, but it's just because of the creativity behind it, and that sort of leveling up of the simple idea of each day this elf shows up somewhere else, which, yeah, I think it's a really really interesting thing as a marketer to look at that through that lens. So okay, we're gonna to find that article, check out Marilyn Cox's LinkedIn profile. Follow her, and you'll find that article and a few others that I think will resonate with most of you listening here. Okay, the last thing I want to ask you about is, in doing some research on you, don't hide it. It's clear you have a wrestling obsession of some sort, Marilyn. What gives with, and I grew up on the WWF, now WWE as well, so I can appreciate it, but what gives with the wrestling?
Oh, well, I mean, shamelessly, some of it is I just like the entertainment of it. But I will say I have become fascinated by the business itself over the last 15 years, especially. I mean, in fact, I just finished reading a really a really great book that I would recommend to even non-wrestling fans called Nitro, and it's all about the Monday Night Wrestling Wars back in the mid to late 90s. And the whole book is actually, I mean, it's like 500 pages, but it's this deep dive into what was going on within Turner Broadcasting during that time, and kind of what gave rise to that competition that occurred between those brands, and inevitably all of the mistakes they made in running that business. But it is a fascinating industry to me. Vince McMahon in particular is someone that I've always been kind of intrigued by, because he's always been a risk taker. You know, the founding of the WWF, for those people that are familiar with it, I mean, he broke a lot of rules back in the 80s to create that. He's always been a bit of a rule breaker. I mean, he was one of the first to launch a mobile app. It was an interactive mobile app. He launched his network several years ago, which people thought was crazy and that he was going to lose all of this money on. And I mean, look at how far ahead he was by launching the WWE network. So I think they've diversified. So I think there are elements of that to me have always been really interesting to see what they do, how they take the information from the feedback from their audience and build on it. As a female who watches wrestling, I did cringe for a really long time about how women were portrayed in professional wrestling. And a few years ago, they dropped the diva And if you look at the athletes now that they've recruited into the organization, I mean, those female athletes are oftentimes better than some of the men that you see in the ring. They are unbelievable. So yeah, I think that it's an interesting it's just an interesting business. It's one that evolved out of, the traveling circus, really. And to see where it's gone from sideshows to now being billion-dollar industry, is just quite fascinating. And then, yeah, I love the bad writing and the fireworks and costumes and stuff too. And I have my wrestling belt back here. So
Look at that. For those of you listening to the podcast, you're missing out right now. She's actually putting on the belt. Oh, wait a minute. She's actually body slamming somebody. But you're totally right. Like, what a great example of, an iconic brand that's been developed, and an industry where the personality, not only of the organization, but of the key individuals within it, have been a huge part of building it. Everything from, the CEO, Vince McMahon, to a lot of the key players, which are the wrestlers themselves, and where storytelling is just such a core part of the business. I mean, it really is the business because it's an entertainment business. But I think all of us as marketers can surely learn a huge number of lessons from what they've done there. And it is just, it is something that becomes such an emotional connection for people. And the way that you associate yourself with that organization, with the individual talents. Again, growing up as a wrestling fan, I can relate to it. Was a big Macho Man, Superfly Jimmy Snuka fan.
Yeah.
George the Animal. For some reason, there's just these incredible, very memorable individuals and even storylines that played out. And I can probably remember a lot of those storylines better than I can books that I read at the time, movies that I watched. Which is, I don't know what that says about me, but it's a good example.
Probably replaying the same storylines, and a lot of wrestlers that you watched back then are actually still wrestling. One thing I think is interesting too, and a lesson for all of us, is that it's an industry that's not exempt from the same challenges that we have, where it's all about connecting with your fans. And if you're not connecting with your fans and telling a good story, then you're going to lose them. And you can't become complacent. And right now, there's there's a new up and coming competitor to WWE called AEW, and it's going to be really interesting to watch what happens over the next 12 to 24 months, because the WWE has had the opportunity to be complacent for quite a while, and I think it's going to shake things up a little bit. So that's my wrestling prediction for everyone as well.
Yes, and see what I did there?
Very good.
I totally agree. Very excited. We're going to leave this as a cliffhanger. Y'all are going to have to go out and search for more information about this wrestling war. You're going to have to check out Marilyn's LinkedIn profile to get the articles on the Elf on the Shelf, and admire all of the wrestling inspired images that go along with those articles.
Exactly.
And you picked, I'm sure that you probably spend more time picking the images to go along with those articles than you did writing them.
You're probably right.
I fully appreciate.
Yeah, yep.
But when it comes to connecting with the audience, those are it immediately resonates.
It's my clickbait.
So, well done. So thank you so much for joining me here, Marilyn. For those who do want to connect with you, learn a little bit more about what you're up to, check out some of your content, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Sure. Well, I mean, absolutely. LinkedIn is a great place to find me. And I can also be reached at my email address, mcox@clubessential.com.
World Wrestling Entertainment, the Elf on the Shelf, improv comedy, and the world of private club memberships. Inspiration for how we connect with audiences in more meaningful ways can come from just about anywhere. But no matter the industry or type of business, one fundamental truth exists. The experiences we create and the connections we make are powered by the real people in our organizations, not our artificial brand. And as you think about reinventing or simply evolving your approach to the market, it may help to think less about rebranding and more about embracing, building, and exposing your business's personality. Thanks for joining us on Creating Connections, brought to you by the fine folks here at Vidyard. If you enjoyed the show, Give it a like or a share, hit that subscribe button for future episodes, and check out the podcast version now available on your favorite podcast platform.